Well, good morning. It's a beautiful sunny President's Day Monday here in downtown Leesburg, Florida. I'm back in the shop today. I've been out roaming around the last couple weeks at the Leesburg Center for the Arts, but back here in the home shop today because I wanted to talk about one of my favorite things, which is full coverage, and especially full coverage cross-stitch made from digital photos. So I'm going to wax philosophical and get excited about that project a bit. This is Gary Sly, and this is the legacy of handmade objects. I guess my journey of cross-stitch has not been all that terribly unique. When I started doing cross-stitch back in the 80s into the 90s, after I went through a phase of crewel, I searched around for images that I wanted to cross-stitch, and there were times when I had trouble finding things that matched my taste. I think a lot of the early cross-stitch was very much focused on, what do we want to say? I guess I usually describe it as violets and ducks and things like that. Decorative motifs. Nothing wrong with any of those, but they didn't suit my taste very much. I've since come to understand that I really enjoy stitching architectural images. And one of the things that I am just over the moon about, and I can talk about forever, is big, complex, 40,000 stitch pieces that are made from digital photos. And early on in this process, when my oldest son was in college, and when I was thinking about wanting to stitch something for him for his college graduation, I found a resource online called picturecraftwork.com. I've referred many people to that through the years. If you want to check it out, it's still available. Somebody did tell me, and I did see it myself, that there's a warning there that since it's an older website, you have to be careful about security issues. But to my knowledge, I've never had any problems with it. I would leave it up to your judgment to decide how to proceed with that. Anyhow, what that opened up for me was this possibility that I could take any photo that I had either taken digitally or that I could take a photo of and turn it into a cross-stitch pattern. And I already knew at that point that I like big, complex images. So I got the idea that for each of my children, when they graduated from college, I would do a cross-stitch, something large and impressive, and that would really give a sense of my appreciation for what they had accomplished from graduating college. That was a big deal. I know for me, when I was a kid, I was the first person in my family to go away to college. So that really mattered a lot to me. So when Carter, my oldest, was midway through his time at Oberlin College up in Ohio, I began a project, and you can see images of that project across the screen of the building that he lived in, because of course the architecture there at Oberlin College is just stunning, and it was just, the building itself was a piece of art, and I thought cross-stitching that and playing into my love of architecture would work very well together. Now the funny story, and not so funny at the time story, was that I got about halfway through this project. Now picture craft work, typically the ones that I've done, have just under 40,000 stitches. You can use up to 150 colors. I think most of mine tend to range in the 70 to 80 colors. So you've got a lot of colors, you've got a lot of shading and gradation of colors, and it's a very complex piece. It can take up to 1.5 years to do one of these. Well, I got about halfway through his, and then we, of course, as parents do, visited the campus one point, and I started walking around, and I got this sinking feeling in my gut. The building that I was stitching was not the building that I thought it was. The picture that I had captured off of the internet had been mislabeled. So I was 20,000 stitches into this beautiful architectural project for my son's graduation, and it was the wrong building. It wasn't what I intended. I commiserated a bit, but Carter understands how long these stitching projects take, so I explained it to him. He said, "Oh, Dad, I love that building. I used to go over there and watch television, so I will be very happy to have that." But I did promise him that at some point, when the other two kids were through and I'd finished those projects, that I would come back and do his beloved building where he had lived in the turret, which looked very much like a kind of a Harry Potter place. And that's the second photo that I have featured, is the one that I eventually got back around to doing. So my oldest son has two of these big full coverage pieces of Oberlin College. For my daughter, she and I took a trip to Athens when she was a good bit younger, still in high school. And when we were in Athens, she's a pretty good photographer, and she took a photo of an old guy in a fabric shop in the old part of the city there. And it's a wonderful thing that you can see there with all the bolts of fabric across the back. That was probably her favorite photo that she had ever taken. And of course, it evoked for me the memories of that wonderful trip that we took together. So that was her gift when she graduated from nursing school at the University of Pittsburgh. And that hangs on the wall in her home there in Pittsburgh even now. My youngest son graduated from the University of Virginia, which is also my alma mater. I found a stunning fall scene, which everybody would recognize, of the mountains and of the rotunda there at the University of Virginia. And that's a piece that I have here in the shop. My youngest son is still living overseas. He's in Germany. And so his piece still hangs here in the shop, and I do show this piece off pretty shamelessly. It's one of my favorite pieces, and again, you can see the very detailed gradation of color that's involved. I don't know how well I can get it where you can actually see that, but there's also the dedication to Graham down in the corner there. If I can find the right corner, there's the right corner that says that it's for Graham and for the year that he graduated from college. So these four pieces have been just kind of the central focus of my excitement in cross stitch for quite a few years now. I have referred many people to picturecraftwork.com, and I do recommend it to you. As far as pros and cons, if you like really complex pieces, this is a good place to go. And you can download pretty much any digital photo that you have available to you. The more colorful, the better, of course, because it gives you that variety of colors that you can use. Downsides, as with any full coverage, you have to be careful that when you're passing threads over the back and when you're finishing off your stitches, that you don't let the surface get too bumpy. You have to create kind of some strategies there to keep that from getting so bumpy. The other thing I realized when I was talking to one person about full coverage is that frequently these patterns do not have any back stitching. You're depending upon the shading, the subtle shading, to do the work that back stitching might do in other pieces. So if you are uncomfortable with that, you might not enjoy full coverage quite as much as I do. So I've had a couple of other pieces that have come my way through the years that are also of a similar scope. I did a legacy piece where a person who had begun a piece passed away, and a friend brought it to me and wanted to know if I would finish it up. And I always love doing that. I feel like that person's DNA and that person's love for stitching is already there in the piece, and it's up to me to kind of give honor to that and to finish it. So Da Vinci's Portrait of Mary, which is a mystic stitch pattern that you can see there on your screen at some point, is one that I did as a legacy project. I was trying to find the pattern, but I think I'll come around to pulling that out here in just a minute. Another favorite of mine, which is a very recent piece, is one I've come to lovingly call Foxy. It's a beautiful rendition of a red fox. based on an oil painting and done as a commission for someone else. And of course you can see Foxy there in the video as well. My youngest son lives in Germany, as I think I mentioned already, and he's often, as all my kids do, often finding me wonderful things that I can stitch. And he gifted me a beautiful kit a number of years back. It's a Riolas kit, and if you know much about these kits, you'll know that they use wool thread instead of cotton, which makes for very nice coverage, but it can be difficult because the wool threads can shred. You can see that this piece I did some framing for. It's really so big that I'm having trouble moving it around, but I did the framing on this, and this is the Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany. And this is a Riolas kit made with wool threads, and it is full coverage, but the subtlety of color is not quite as intense. It's not the same as what you'd see with picture craft work, and most of the sky and the mountains and things like that are half stitches. So this one really only took about 6 months to do, as opposed to a year and a half for most of those more intense ones that I've shown you before. This piece is still here in the shop as well because it's a little too expensive to take in a carry-on luggage back to Europe. But at some point, I hope Graham looks forward to hanging both this and the UVA photo stitch in his home. So those are the biggest and the most complex full coverage pieces, but you don't always have to do them that big. I got pretty excited to find out that there's an app on my phone that I can use, which will also turn digital photos into cross-stitch patterns. It's called Magic Needle, excuse me. The app is free to download, but you do have to pay a fee if you want to create a pattern and use that yourself. You'd want to store it and use it on your, you'd want to email it to yourself and so forth. I forgot to mention picture craft work. Those patterns are $12, which is not a bad price to pay. And it's a similar deal. Once you've created the pattern, you download it and send it to yourself as an email or as a link at least, and then you can create that, you can print that pattern and use it however you like. Magic Needle was an opportunity for me to take fairly small pieces that I could stitch rather quickly. You can see images in my video of a face mask that I did. My wife made a bunch of face masks at the beginning of the COVID epidemic, and I've used that image in a piece that I'm doing, which is commemorative of lives lost during COVID. Somebody came in one day and had a napkin with this really cool antique Santa on it. And as you can see, I created a cross-stitch pattern based on the napkin, because all I had to do was take a photo of it, turn it into a pattern. There's an image of the virus, of the COVID virus. Again, that's part of stitching the situation. An image, a set of images that I'm doing to commemorate one of the days of the pandemic. There's a white squirrel that I found, or my wife found, in North Carolina, western North Carolina, and I made some effort to create a pattern and eventually a work in progress based on the image that I had of the white squirrel. Now, here's a place where I can tell you where sometimes full coverage and this digital to cross stitch can be frustrating. I didn't want to do all the background work that surrounded the squirrel. I really just wanted to focus on the squirrel, which meant that I probably needed to do some back stitch. But I had to kind of make up the back stitch as I went along, and I've never been quite happy with what I've done so far. As you know, frogging out back stitch can be pretty difficult. So this has become one of those works in progress that I've not gotten much farther with. But it is a design that I worked on from Magic Needle. The final one that I have there as an image is a sunset that I took at Lake Hermosa here in Lady Lake, Florida. The sunsets here in Florida are always stunning, and the colors were beautiful. and it's one that I have begun. I couldn't find it this morning, but it's another one of those works in progress that I'm hoping to do, and I'm doing it on black fabric. So as you can imagine, I kind of dread going back to it because working on those really dark fabrics can be difficult. So picture craft work is for the most intense large projects. Magic Needle would be an example of a resource you could use for very small things. If you want something kind of in the middle, and that's where you see an image of Diagon Alley that I made for a boss that I had at Universal Studios. I used a resource called pixelstitch.net, pixelstitch.net. Pixel Stitch for me was a nice kind of mid-range product. Images that I wanted to do but maybe didn't want to spend a year and a half on. Here's one. This is a digital image of one of my daughter's cats, and I intend to eventually get around to stitching all of my kids' pets, all of my grand pets, if you want to call them. And this is an example of that, but also the photo of Diagon Alley, which was based on a drawing made by a professor from Savannah College of Arts and Design who was visiting Diagon Alley and gave me permission to cross-stitch it. I eventually did that for my boss, Don. So it doesn't take much to get me excited and start talking about how exciting it can be to either turn digital photos into cross-stitch patterns or to just experiment with full coverage pieces. I do think different kinds of projects are related to different personalities. And some people look at a 40,000 stitch piece and they say there's no way on God's green earth that I would ever get around to doing that. And that I understand that. But then there are those like me who start a project like that and can't wait to get back to it. So I would urge you to at least look around and kind of see what's available. I wanted to show you some of the products that I have. Many of these are companies that are not in business anymore, but you can still find the patterns. Stitching Addiction is the one that was used for that pattern, that legacy pattern I was telling you about Da Vinci's Madonna. You can see the original person did like to highlight when she finished stitches. I don't do that, but there are certainly people who enjoy it. A Touch of Pink is an image from Charleston, South Carolina by designers Barbara and Cheryl. I don't think they're still active, but those are some wonderful pieces. Marcia Manning did a full coverage of Mount McKinley. Of course, it's now Mount Denali. It was renamed. So there's really are some wonderful images. A Japanese footbridge, which is a replay of a Claude Monet painting turned into a cross-stitch pattern. And this was done by the Fine Arts Heritage Society. Many times you will see works of art adapted into cross-stitch. This is called Winter, adapted from the artwork of Francois Boucher. Mystic Stitch is probably one of those companies that you might be familiar with that got a good reputation for doing full coverage pieces. This is an image from Varenna Harbor. This is an image, looks like off the coast of the United States. And the Foxy pattern that I showed you was also a Mystic Stitch piece. This is maybe one that you would do on Magic Needle, but that's full coverage with all the shading in the background. I think those are probably the main. Here's one more I love is Petunia and Her Pigs. That's a full coverage piece, and that actually gives you a little bit of back stitch direction with that as well. I told you I could drone on about this for a while, and it looks like I have. But I'm going to end there and just suggest that if this is something you're interested in, that you do a little exploration, look at some of these resources that I've mentioned today, and see what you can do about creating a legacy with full coverage pieces, especially if you have a wonderful digital photo that you'd like to turn into a work of art. As always, this is Gary Sly. I want you to think about the legacy of handmade objects. Have a great week.